Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to show you how to create a simple real-time stock value simulator using NODEJS. If you have ever wondered how apps like Zerodha, Grow or any other stockbroker apps display stock values that update every second, this video is for you. We are going to build this in NODEJS, but the concept is the same in any language that supports WebSockets. The code that we'll be writing is a very simplified version of how these apps actually function. You can think of it as building a foundation upon which more complex apps are developed. In reality, these apps have a lot more complex components and can take months to release for even a beta version. Let's talk about WebSockets first. WebSockets provide a way to create a real-time two-way communication channel between a client and a server, client being a web browser. This allows for persistent connections where both the client and the server can send and receive messages independently. Unlike REST APIs, where each request is initiated by the client, WebSockets enable continuous communication without the need for repeated network requests. This means you won't see individual network requests in the browser's developer tools. I hope everything is clear till now, so without further ado, let's get started. First, let's set up our Node.js project. Open your terminal and let's create a new directory for your project. So I'm in my terminal right now and I'll just switch to the working directory. Okay, we're here and let's create a new directory. Let's call it stock simulator. Okay, and let's initialize our project and I'll run npm init, pass the y flag. Okay, now we need our dependencies. So the necessary packages that we are going to install are Express and WS. Express is another framework which is built on top of Node.js, and WS is the WebSocket package that we are going to install. So let's install both of them. Okay, so these are the dependencies that I'm installing. Now let's open this directory in the code editor. You can use any code editor of your choice. I'm using VS Code right here. And let me just increase the size a bit so that you can see what I'm writing. Okay, now let's create our server. Okay, so let's create a new file here. Let's call it server.js. Now let's start writing some code. We'll first actually we'll get the Express package and let's get the HTTP package as well to create this server. Let's say HTTP here. We also need the WebSocket, so let's import that as well. WS, yeah. Okay, and we also need the path, so let's import that as well. Okay, now the first thing is to initialize our Express app. So let's write const app equal to Express, and we have initialized our app. Let's define our server. So HTTP create server and we just pass our app to it. Okay, now let's create a WebSocket server. So do that WSS, let's call it WebSocket server. And now we do that, we have it as WS and we say dot server. Yep. And we pass on our server to it. My bad. Now we need to tell Express where to read our static files from. So we'll say app.use and we say from Express use the static, and now we need to pass the path. So we say path.join and it will be directory name, comma, we'll store our static assets in the public folder. So we'll create a public folder. So let's create a new folder here. It will be public. Okay, and let's create an index.html file here. Okay, I'll get back to it later. Now we need to start our server. Okay, so till now what we have done is we have created our Express app, we have created an HTTP server, and we have created a WebSocket server, right? What we need is on WebSocket server, we'll say on, and we'll say on connection. What we need is we need to serve something, right? So whenever our server is listening, the connection is on, we'll say, okay, what we need is let's print a command which says, okay, client is connected. Okay, so whenever a client connects to our server, we will print client is connected. Okay, now what we need is we need to send some data to our client, right? So in the applications, any stock broker applications, you see the stock prices are constantly changing, right, every second. So we'll try to simulate that behavior here. Let's call it send stock updates, and we'll need to use the set interval function because we need to send values every single second. So we'll say let's create an object here. Let's call it stock data, and we'll say pass the symbol for Apple. It's AAPL, and the price will be. So how do you generate a price? So what happens is usually these stockbroker apps get the data from large institutions. I'll show you how you can get that data at the end of this video, but for now we are just going to simulate this behavior. So what we'll do is we will just create some random value, okay, and let's multiply it by 1000, let's say, okay, and we need it to be at least 2 decimal places. Okay, so we've got it here, and what we'll do now is we'll say, okay, now we need to send this data. Okay, how do we send this? We say json.stringify, and what our data is, it's stock data. Okay, and for every 1000 millisecond, which is every single second, we will set this, we'll send the data, right? Okay, now till now we are clear. We are sending some data whenever there is a connection. We also need to listen when our client closes a connection. Okay, so what we will do is sorry, my set interval is this one, so this 1000 will be here and not here. Okay, so we just remove it from here, and after this we need to listen for the close. So whenever our connection gets closed from our client, we'll say client disconnected. Okay, let me just close this. Client disconnected, and we'll just clear our interval so that it doesn't get called again and again. Okay, so this is the send stock updates. Okay, we need to actually start our server. Till now we have defined the behavior, but now we actually need to start our server. So we'll say let's define a port here first. Okay, so let's say let's call it 3000 port number, and we'll say server dot listen, and we'll pass the port here. My bad. Okay, and we'll pass a callback here, and we say console dot log, and we say server started at port and port. Let's go through the code again. We have just imported some of the dependencies that we're using, and we've initialized the app. We have created a server here, the WebSocket server here, and on connection we are displaying a message and then sending data every single second. And on close connection we just say client is connected, and we just clear that interval. And here we are actually we are starting our server. Okay, now let's go to our index.html. In index.html, I'll just create a very simple web page that will just display some of the data that we are going to send to our client. Okay, we'll just center a few of the things here and there. So let's say body, and what we need is actually display flags. We say justify content, we'll say center, and we say align items. It will also be center, so everything is center, and just give it a height. We say 100 viewport height. Let's give it a background color. Okay, let's start in the body. Okay, and let's also give it an ID, stock. Let's say we say loading here. When you open the web page, it will just say loading. Okay, so let's write some JavaScript on front end now. We have created this public folder and we're writing inside the index.html. It contains only a single HTML page to display the data. Obviously, if you were creating a production grade app, you'd use a framework with more features and capabilities, but we are going to keep it simple. So this HTML file creates a simple UI that displays the stock value and connects to the WebSocket server to receive updates every second. Okay, so let's write some more code here. We'll say, first we'll get the stock value element where we have to display our value, the stock value that we will get from the server, right? So get element by ID, and the ID is stock. Let's create a socket. Okay, so how do you create a socket? You say web socket and you write it like this: ws, which says WebSocket, and then you define the URL. So our URL is going to be localhost and then 3000, because we defined the port 3000 in our server file. What we need is on socket, we still need to listen. So we'll say socket dot on message. Okay. Okay. Now we say stock value element dot text content is equal to event dot data. Okay, so whatever we're going to get from our server, we will just display it here, right? So this data that we are sending, we'll just display it here. Okay, now we still need to listen to any errors, and whenever the connection is closed, let's just copy paste this. Okay, so we say socket on error now. Okay, and let's just print a message that we've got WebSocket error, and error being the error that we get. Okay, and it will be defined here. Text content we can set to, let's say, error loading stock value. For connection close, we'll have to listen to that as well. So we'll say on close in case the server closes the connection. Okay, so we say stock value element dot text content. We'll say connection closed by server. Now we are done here. Now let's open our terminal and we'll say node, and let's run our server file, localhost 3000. Okay, now I'll just increase the size here so you can see this is the data that we are sending from our server, and the price you can see constantly changing. Obviously this is not the correct price, we are just generating some random values, but this is how the apps actually work. They just get the data and then display the data on their front end side. So this is the basic thing that we have discussed here. Before I explain the code, so what we'll do is let's go here again, and let me do this. And you see, if I just close this tab, okay, I'll just open a new one and I'll just close this. You can see in the terminal it says client disconnected. That's because we have been listening to the message here. So it says whenever the connection is closed, you display client disconnected, and it just stops sending the stock values, right? So it says client disconnected. Now again, if I go to localhost 3000, you see it says client disconnected, and for a second you could see loading here, right, until it connects to the server. And if I just close this server here now, so you see it says connection closed by server. Okay, instead of saying the client got disconnected. Okay, so how does this actually work? Okay, so we set up a node server using Express to serve our static files and created a WebSocket server to handle real-time communication. Okay, so as we were just generating the values here, and as soon as the value was generated, it was sent to the UI. okay, on our HTML page. So on the client side, we used JavaScript to connect to the WebSocket server and update the stock every time we receive new data. So that's what we're doing here, right? Every time we get the data, we just display it here. So this is a simplified version of what real stockbroker apps do. In a production scenario, you'd have real-time data from stock exchanges or market data providers. Okay, there will be robust security measures, scalability considerations, and much more, because these apps are really complex. We have just gone through the foundation of that. Okay, now if you're wondering how you can build an application like this using actual data, I can show you how. What you can do is you can just type BSc real-time stock data. Okay, go to the market data products here. You see there are the tariff plans for domestic as well as international. You can just click on this link and it will open this PDF file, and you can see the pricing here. Obviously it's not free. There are multiple levels, so it's level 1, level 2, level 3, and prices increase as you go further. Okay, so you can go through this. Obviously, if you're not willing to spend too much money, you can opt for data from Zerodha Kite as well. Okay, so Kite, they offer developer APIs from which you can get data. While it's not free, it's definitely cheaper than getting data from institutions like this. Okay, so we are currently at BSc. You can get the data from NSE as well. Okay, so I hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you did, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon to get notified of new videos. If you have any questions or suggestions, leave them in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.